All right, all right. Welcome, everyone, to a Sales Hacker live event. Thank you so much for all taking the time here, spending the next hour with us. We still have some folks rolling in. So as they join us, let's cover some quick housekeeping. Um, Please, as people are rolling in, go to that chat box, tell us your name, your role, and where you're tuning in from. We'd love to know who all joined this webinar. And we want to keep this session very interactive. So please take advantage of being here live and chat with all the other attendees, Jonathan and Whitney. If you have a question for the panelists, you'll find we have a Q&A box. Please ask any questions of the panelists in that box so they don't get lost in the chat. We have time at the end to go over some questions in there, as well as during some of the topics that we're going over. So, to briefly introduce some of the topics that we're going in, it's all about process, tactics, and tech that top performing revenue leaders and sales leaders are using to enable their teams to sell. So before we get into it, I'm going to introduce you to some incredible folks that you'll be learning from today. So Whitney, I'll pass it over to you. Brief intro, and then pass it to Jonathan, and we can kick it off.
Sounds great. Thanks, Mark. Hi, everyone. My name's Whitney Sieck. I'm head of revenue enablement and outreach, and we take a really scalable, outcomes-based approach to enablement. I've got members of my team that are strategic partners for every part of our go-to-market org. So from our SDRs to our account executives to professional services and service partners, all the way through to customer success. So really excited to chat with you all about what 2022 has in store. And with that, I'll pass it over to Jonathan.
Yeah, thanks, Whitney. Thanks, Mark. Awesome to be here, and thank you everybody for attending. It's amazing to see such a good turnout. So soon after the holidays, I hope you're all awake, ready to go. I know I needed an extra cup of coffee this morning, but I'm ready. I'm Senior Director of Marketing at Allego. We're a sales enablement technology company, and we really help sales teams with everything from coaching, peer-to-peer learning and collaboration, sales content management, everything that the sales team needs to be successful at virtual and hybrid selling. So we're very close to this topic today. Excited to dive into it with you guys. And yeah, let's get going.
All right, let me share my screen here. All right, so the topic of the webinar, state of sales enablement. The three main topics we'll be going over: the key trends, right? The emergence of virtual buying, the consolidation of sales enablement technology, the evolution of learning technology, so how AI and CI amplify hybrid learning. So those are three of the main topics we're going to dive into today. So first off, the emergence of virtual buying, right? First thing that comes to mind, why is that happening? Jonathan, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, I think it's super convenient for buyers to buy virtually, right? And a lot of sellers don't want to hear that. A lot of sellers have historically thrived on face-to-face, in-person interaction, taking people out to dinner, taking people to shows, to games. Not saying that doesn't happen and that's not important, but it's really, as a buyer, I know that, I buy technology. Oops, I just ripped my headphones out of my ears. I buy technology all the time. And it's a lot easier for me to go to a website, to fill out a demo request form, to get some time on my calendar, to have a 30-minute meeting with a vendor. And I want them to tell me everything they can about why their solution is right for me, right? And then I move on with my day and I can make an evaluation a lot more quickly. I don't need to be wined and dined. I just want to get down to business. And I think this has always been true to some degree. I don't think that virtual buying is particularly new, but it is highly prevalent now, especially in the past couple of years. As the pandemic forced us all into virtual buying and selling scenarios. And we've seen this interesting shift as sellers have wanted to go back out into the field, and not all buyers really do. Buyers are like, you know what, we're good. We're happy here. If you go to the next slide, Mark, I think there's if you want to click forward, there's a stat. It says that 80% of buyers will now reject sellers who are unable to deliver a relevant human and digital buying experience. That means if you as a seller cannot meet the buyers where they are and provide not just a digital buying experience for them, but a personalized digital buying experience for them, then you're not up to snuff, right? You're not cutting it. for buyers these days, and that's just something we have to sit with that and accept it. But people prefer digital first buying for the convenience reasons that we've already talked about. But they still want that personalized touch. So you can't just, as a seller, you can't be cookie cutter about it. You can't just say the same thing over and over and over again. You've got to understand who your buyer is. You've got to do your research on them. You've got to construct a presentation that is not only personalized and tailored to the buyer, but also probably fits into a much smaller time window, probably that 30-minute window, whereas before in person, maybe you were meeting for an hour or more. It's really tough, but this is now the expectation because this digital buying experience gives people greater control, more self-sufficiency as they navigate the buying process. So as a seller, you need to be able to fit into the buyer's expectations.
Yeah, I thought that was beautifully said, Jonathan. I think what it really comes down to in my mind is that a lot of these corporate buying trends do follow consumer buying trends as well. And so when we start to see like online retail shopping and, all of the different ways that, during the pandemic, buying in general shifted to this virtual space, that only enhances the need and the necessity of moving it that way in the corporate world as well. So we can watch some of these trends that are happening in our day-to-day life and apply them to what's going to be coming down our way from a corporate perspective too.
100%. So, at Allego, we always think about how do we best enable the seller to meet buyers where they are and to provide the best selling and buying experience possible. And Mark, if you click over to the next slide, I think this is kind of a useful visual, at least for me. If we're thinking about how to enable a team, it's all about how do we deliver information to reps that is useful and when they need it. So on the left-hand side of this chart, just kind of orient you, this is all the content that is going to the rep, right? This is marketing, providing marketing content to the rep, providing decks to them, one-sheets, case studies. It's sales trainers and its L&D teams providing tailored bite-sized learning experiences to sellers so that they can be articulate about what they're selling. It's about sales managers providing ongoing coaching to teams. Coaching is incredibly important. We have always known this, but especially with virtual and hybrid teams, coaches, managers need to be able to provide individualized coaching to reps at scale. We're in SKO season now, right? And that's one of the few times of year that we have the opportunity to get sellers together in one space, even if it's virtual, but at the same time, and deliver the same content to those sellers. But most of the time throughout the year, as a coach, you need to make sure that you're providing your reps with these individual touch points, these coaching touch points, where you can provide feedback and guidance, help them become better. Your technology and your processes need to be able to accommodate that kind of coaching at scale, which is hard to achieve. You've got subject matter experts throughout your company. You've got peers. You've got reps, right, who can share content with one another as well. And then all of the data that comes from your CRM is an input into your seller as well. All of this helps to enable the seller to be proficient at virtual selling and delivering a good virtual buying experience. Gives them the information they need to personalize that experience to the buyer. And then on the right-hand side of the chart, you have all the information that is going out from the seller to the buyer. So it's emails, it's content, it's recorded calls and meetings, digital sales rooms. We can talk a little bit about. This is kind of a new innovation where instead of having to share all of your decks, all of your one-pagers, all of your contracts, every piece of content that you need within a buying cycle, you can, rather than sharing that through email, you can share it through a digital sales room, through this micro-site where you can host all of your content, share that link with the buyer. They can access that content on their own time, all in one place. It's really convenient. We can talk a little bit more about the benefits of that. And then, of course, any social networking that's going on. But I like this chart just because it puts the rep at the center of information flow, which is important. This is all about enabling your sales team, so they should be at the center of this process. And it's about giving them information that they can use exactly when they need it. Enablement needs to shift, I think, from delivering all of your training content at one time, regardless of when the need occurs, to more just-in-time learning. Right? When a rep is about to go into a meeting with a buyer, they can go into their content repository, find exactly what they need. They can find competitive battle cards, again, case studies, anything that's pertinent to the conversation that they're about to have. They know exactly where to find that, how to utilize it, and then go on their way. They're going to learn better that way and be more effective in their selling process. So, Whitney, I know I've gone on for a long time, but anything to add here, on this topic?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I like this image as well because you're right. With the seller in the center, it shows that two of the things that they need to focus on and react to from this new virtual selling is both optionality and preference-based selling in order to meet the needs of their buyers. And so that means we need to have some flexible gives that are available to the reps to determine what makes the most sense based on that particular journey that they're on. And so that might be more marketing resources, any additional value adds, events that they need to be aware of, and like how to reach out to let their buyers know about those. But I think that that's something that's been a big shift in this virtual selling environment and will be into this year as well, is like not just a rigid customer journey, one size fits all approach. You have to be able to be flexible in order to interact with and engage your buyer that way. And you did hit on quite a few of the trends from the enablement side. I think the just-in-time learning is something that we've talked about in our space for a really long time, but no one's really been able to like put it into action until just this past few years, I'd say, is when we've scratched the surface. So I'm loving seeing that come to light. The other thing that I think is really interesting is, we've been riding this like up and down roller coaster through the pandemic and not fully committing to a lot of these changes. I think this year is the year that we commit and we like say, okay, we've got to accept the fact that virtual selling is going to be around for a while, and let's put a really cool strategy around it. And so part of that also means going back to basics. And so seller technical acumen is one of the biggest trending topics that I'm seeing in our space right now, is how do we retrain our sellers on our common tech stack? How do we get back to basics and ensure that people have mastered those foundational workflows and use cases so that we can leverage those channels in a more efficient way? So that's definitely another trend that I'm seeing.
I totally agree with that. Yeah. Go back to basics, always a good idea. Reps need to be they must be not only comfortable, but fluent in all of the different types of technology that they need to use to be successful. It's funny. I've had a few conversations with reps recently where they had to actually do an in-person sale. They had an in-person meeting, and they were like, I was totally lost because I didn't have my second screen over here with all the information that I need. So I think we are starting to naturally see everybody become not only comfortable with virtual buying and selling, but sort of dependent on the technology that helps them succeed. But I love, Whitney, what you're saying about the trend is that this is the trend. Virtual buying and selling is not going anywhere.
Right.
Our Band-Aid solutions that a lot of us have used for almost 2 years probably aren't enough, or at least are worthy of re-examination, right? Is this right? Are these the processes that are and the technologies that are going to take us into the future and that we can rely on? Or do we need to go back to basics, reevaluate, and start to rebuild a much more solid, systematic way? Love it.
Yeah, and that leads me to my next question. With kind of the trend that virtual buying and virtual selling is here to stay, how do we enable, where do you see in the next 6, 8, 9 months, where do we see the trend going as far as enabling our reps, right? Is it adding technology? Is it, like you mentioned, back to basics? Where do you see that trend kind of taking off as it's becoming more and more common that virtual selling and buying is here for the long term?
Yeah, I think pandemic was the starting point, and tech companies definitely had an advantage in this because we already had pretty robust tech stacks. But in that, it can be really challenging when you move into a tech company for the first time and you've got to navigate not one tool, not two tools, but up to 10 or 20 tools, especially as trying to figure out what that company does in addition to your day-to-day workflows within those pieces of technology. So that integration of technology and really understanding the seller experience as well as the buyer experience, marrying those two, in a sense, is the challenge that a lot of people in enablement face. And how do we make that more consumable quickly so that way we can get all of our sellers on the same page early on in the onboarding process to decrease their ramp time? That's the overarching goal, and that's tale as old as time. But I think the prevalence of technology in that is what is on the newer side.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think that we all need to focus more on alignment of all teams, right? Not just the sales team, and using technology to help us do that. I think about marketing and sales. Right? As a marketer, I'm always talking with our sales team, trying to get feedback, trying to get insights into what's working, what's not working. That's so important to us. On our team, we're creating content for sellers, but if we don't have insight into what's happening in the field and how our content is being used, we're not going to create the best content, which means we're not creating the best experience for sellers or for buyers. So I really encourage everybody, and I'm seeing this more and more, to align specifically their sales and marketing teams, but also pull in product teams as subject matter experts to help educate everybody about what's coming down the road from a product perspective, right? Bring in engineering, bring in customer success, get all of your teams aligned and unified, using the same technology, understanding the go-to-market strategy. That is just general enablement, right? That's not just sales enablement. That is company-wide enablement that all feeds into sales success. And I'm seeing that happen. I'm seeing more and more conversations about that, of people realizing that sales success is so dependent on the entire company, right? And having everybody have access to the same tools and having insight into the same goals. So I think that's going to continue this year as well, and certainly into the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And how should companies start reacting to this shift, right? What are your views on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be biased in this, but I'm going to say a lot of investment in enablement. I think that is part of the trend that I'm starting to hear, even from analysts in the market, is like, I know a lot of my industry peers crave ratios for their enablement org structures and say like, oh, you need like a 50-1 ratio. They want to have like that headcount ratio the same way that sales does. But we aren't there yet as an industry to do that. But we are hearing analysts talk about ratios as low as like 20-1 when it comes to enablement and going into this next year. So I think that enablement is definitely part of that trend going into this year from an investment perspective. The other thing is think about the platform play and the long-term strategy. So one thing that my team's been focused on this year is we've been doing a lot of launches. We're a relatively new team. We're building a lot of foundations. But not only are we looking at the short term, we're looking at the long term. And so we're building out these maturity models to show us what is the long tail of how we can continue to drive adoption in the tools that we're putting in front of the teams. So we don't want to just let the team loose in a tool and figure out best practices on their own. We want to guide them in a way that makes logical sense and drive adoption of those core functionality first before introducing some more of the advanced cool features and function sets that you really need that foundation to build off of.
Yeah. I think, one thing that immediately comes to mind is actually our next topic, so I won't dive too deep into it, but the consolidation of sales enablement technology, using more all-in-one platforms, reducing your tech stack, which helps to drive rep adoption. That's got to be top of mind for folks. But again, I'll leave that alone for a minute. For me, it's all about think through your sales and your enablement process, and as it's currently set up, is it currently working as hard as it can for both the seller and for the buyer, right? Think about this chart. Thinking about, does the seller have all of the information that they need to be successful exactly when they need to be successful, right? I said it before. Do they have that just-in-time knowledge? Can they learn in the flow of work? Is learning not just a discrete activity, but is it an ongoing activity? And does your process and your technology accommodate that? I think, at Allego, we rely a lot on the YouTube example and how we learn in our personal lives, right? If a pipe in my basement breaks, what am I going to do? I'm probably not going to go online and look for like the next live training session on how to fix my pipes, right? I'm gonna go onto YouTube and I'm gonna watch the video about how to do it right now. Right? This is how we learn. We learn when we need the information and when we have that information at our fingertips. We need to try to replicate that experience at work, right? And empower reps to be able to find their own solutions when they need them. So that's a little bit scary, I think, for some sales teams, because it's not quite as structured as we're all used to, right? And we have a little bit less control about what reps are accessing and how they're accessing and when they're accessing and what they're doing with that information. But I encourage us to kind of let go of the rigidity of previous enablement and training models and realize that, yeah, formal training is still important and certifications are still necessary, and you can go through that process, but amplify that with more informal learning, more bite-sized content, more peer-to-peer content where reps are sharing information and win stories with one another. Build a culture of learning and build this this never-ending cycle of knowledge sharing. And I think you're going to see performance improvement and also more rep investment and team investment, just because people feel more committed and more of a part of the entire enablement process.
Yeah, absolutely. I have one more subtopic before we drive into consolidation. Use of digital sales rooms collaboratively, right? How do you see that playing a role in virtual buying?
Yeah. So I touched on this a little bit ago, but I think it's cool technology, and I'd be curious actually if folks on the call are using it or if they're familiar with it. It's still relatively new, but it's a pretty simple idea, right? It's the fact that you can share all relevant sales content with a prospect or with a set of prospects in one place, right? So you're not. I can't tell you how much time I probably waste going back through emails with vendors, looking for slide decks, looking for proposals, looking for red lines, looking for case studies, all the stuff that you request over the course of a buying process. Digital sales rooms simply allow you to store all that information in one place. So I have one link as a buyer where I can go and I can see everything that is relevant to that buying experience. I can actually chat with a rep directly within a digital sales room. I can have a conversation right there. As a rep, this helps me obviously centralize all the content I'm sharing. I can, if you're using a platform like Allego, for instance, I can record a video of myself as a rep, contextualizing all the content that is in the digital sales room. So I can say, hey, Joe Smith, thanks so much for the meeting the other day. Here I've shared these 4 assets that I think you're going to find really helpful. Here's how to contextualize them. Let me know any questions you have. You can do all that right within the digital sales room experience. This is technology that's built in the spirit of making the virtual buying process easier, right? Reducing friction, making it more convenient, right? It's about meeting the virtual buyer where they are, right? It's not about having the buyer bend over backwards for the seller. It's about spoon feeding them the information that they need in a really easy to digest way. So I think this. Yeah, go ahead, Whitney. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's how you take content that may not seem personalized, stuff that's being created by your company, and you personalize it by making sure that it's the right content for this buying journey. It's not them going to the website and exploring and doing that type of self-service, but that self-service mentality is still there through the sales process. And so this allows them to have that space to do that. I also think it's really interesting because sales is collaborative, and we haven't had technology that really supports that nature. We've got things that help with mutual action plans now that really help drive towards similar actions and content and keeping everyone aligned every step of the way. But I also think they're good indicators of the health of a deal too, right? If you see that someone is engaging in your sales room quite frequently, you've got a higher probability and you have a better sense of their level of interest than if they're never clicking into it, and you know where to spend your time as a seller too, which I think that type of data and insight is really informative because prioritization is key right now and making sure that you're spending your time in the right places. So that's one thing that I'm really excited about with this type of technology too.
Yeah, it's true. We haven't even touched on data and ROI, right? Connecting, but it's so important. Everybody on the call everybody on this presentation needs to think about how do I correlate content usage with sales outcomes? How do I correlate training activity and learning activity with sales outcomes? Technology is allowing us to do this a lot more easily now, right? Where we can go into a platform, we can see each seller's engagement with learning content, we can see how often they've shared a piece of sales content, and we can start to connect that to our CRM data, right? To see how is that connected to what's actually happening at the end of the pipeline. And this is information we've always wanted to get to, but for the most part, we've relied on anecdotal evidence to draw conclusions. But now it's becoming a lot more black and white, which is really exciting. And I think this technology is only going to improve over the next couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. And then let's dive into our next topic here. Sales enablement consolidation. Right. I know, Jonathan, you alluded to it a little bit ago. So I'll start with you. Like, what do you feel is driving this overall movement?
Yeah, yeah. Mark, why don't you click over to the next slide? I think we have a fairly simple chart that I like to use just to contextualize this conversation. Because I think the field of sales enablement, the term sales enablement, is actively changing right in front of our eyes. I think a lot of people think about sales enablement, they think about just like sales content distribution, right? But if you think about it now, you have all these kind of disparate spaces coming together. If you look at each of these different sections of this circle, onboarding and training, launches and rollouts, content management, virtual selling, coaching and collaboration, I think we've often thought about these as separate things, right? With that often need separate pieces of technology to accommodate them, right? We have our own learning technology, we have our own sales content management technology, and we have our own coaching technology or coaching processes. But when you look at it, when you think about it, all of these different areas are incredibly tightly bound, right? In order to sell virtually successfully, you need to know where your content is and how to use it, right? That's content management. You need to understand how your product launches are rolling out and all the pertinent messaging and the certifications that go along with them. You need ongoing coaching. You need ongoing collaboration with your peers. And at the very beginning of it all, you need to make sure that you're onboarded appropriately and that you have ongoing training that's taking place throughout your entire career, right? Not just during a discrete training period. All of these different areas are connected. And I think a real pain point over the past few years has been gaining transparency across all of these different technologies, right? About unifying all these different technologies. It's been really hard to gain insight into what's happening on the training side and how that's connecting to the content management side, right? And how what's happening in content is connecting to coaching. If you have different systems for all of these different pieces, it's really hard to unify the vision around how effective they all are. And it's really hard to get reps to adopt all of them. We actually just completed some research. It's yet to be published, so this is a sneak peek. We just did some research on companies that use multiple sales enablement technologies, and if you've got more than a couple going at one time, you see rep adoption fall off a cliff, right? They don't know where to find things. They don't know how to use different technologies. They think it's a waste of time, and they don't use the technologies effectively. So we're starting to see this consolidation of technology. We're starting to see more all-in-one sales enablement platforms that cover each of these different areas. And I think it's only going to continue because it solves for a lot of those issues and better connects the entire selling process. Whitney, obviously curious to get your take.
Yeah, I mean, this slide really resonates with me. My team is living this day to day, right? I think the way that we articulate some of this message, though, and where I think the consolidation will help us in the long run is we tried to shift the thinking of our leadership team in that enablement is not responsible for necessarily these deliverables, but we're responsible for the outcomes of these deliverables, right? So no longer are we talking about onboarding, we're talking about how do we decrease ramp time. And yes, onboarding is a part of that, but we view enablement as a team sport. So attaching to outcomes has been a really big strategic shift for our enablement team. And I think that that's something that drives this shift in technology as well. Some historical context that I feel like leads up into this is for the longest time, it was just sales training, right? And organizations were recognizing this as an internal cost center. I mean, there would actually be, you'd track attendance and you would charge back to the organizations to cover the cost of the programming and the IP. And so attendance and feedback surveys for the longest time were the measure of success. And so warm fuzzies about a facilitator doesn't justify the astronomical cost of training and train the trainer programs. And so these folks, myself included, like this is where I got my start too, were some of the first to transition into enablement. And if you didn't have that background of being a go-to-market leader, it was really hard to attach to the metrics that were important for the organizations that you were partnered with. And so I think that that's been a shift where, enablement has started to see this challenge and this trend through the years where data is becoming even more important to justify our existence. And when the pandemic hit, unfortunately, a lot of peers in the industry were let go and let off because it was viewed that way. And now that perception is starting to shift in these companies. And I feel it and I see it in a lot of my industry peers that the value of enablement is being recognized. And it's because we have a lot more data to back us up. And that trend is only going to continue to increase.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Mark, if you go to the next animation here, just shows how this wheel kind of aligns. Give it one more click. So yeah, that didn't work. I think the animation broke. But what you would have seen there is that circle aligns very much with what Gartner is seeing right now. So if you look at what the analysts are looking at the market, they're often the folks who are defining the trends that are happening in our space right now, and it aligns very closely with what they're seeing as well. So this isn't just us saying it, right? This is definitely third party validated. But I think the more impactful slide is the next one, Mark. That just kind of looks at the entire sales enablement and sales engagement landscape, because it's overwhelming. I'll be the first to admit it. And I think I look at the landscape every day, and there's always a new player, and it's kind of hard to keep track of what's going on and what each company does. So again, I think this is a nice visual just to center everybody around what's happening. You've got your sales enablement platforms, right? The Allegos and Seismics and HighSpots of the world. And we're dealing with sales readiness, extended enterprise enablement, right beyond just the sales organization, learning management, sales content management. Then you've got the sales engagement side of the house, sales lofts and outreaches and gongs of the world. Much more dealing with the actual tactical day-to-day of virtual selling, cadence automation, scheduling automation, follow-up automation, conversation intelligence. And they kind of meet in the middle, all around virtual selling, about creating shared content experiences, or like digital sales rooms, around coaching automation, conversation intelligence, right? Recording calls and getting insights from those calls and making recommendations about next steps based on those calls. But we've always had these different pieces, but the worlds are converging and coming together and creating something a little bit different, a little bit more impactful than what we had before. So I like this. It shows you where the landscape has been and how it's coming together and how it's continuing to evolve. I guarantee you that if we look at this in a year, it'll have shifted slightly, right? Different players will come onto the board. Capabilities will continue to merge, because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to gain efficiency, right, in everything that we're doing in enablement and in selling. How do we gain better insights? How do we get better rep adoption? How do we give reps the tools that they need to sell better, more efficiently, right? So any way that we can leverage technology to do this and to consolidate our technology stack to make it easier for both managers and sellers to do their jobs, you can expect to see that trend continue.
Jonathan, I saw a question in the chat that some of these items here have a plus sign next to them. Is there a differentiator that those pieces of technology or those facets have?
Not really.
Okay.
No.
I was trying to make the connection too. I was like, well, I'll ask.
No, it's a good question. I think it's just saying, sales readiness can mean a lot of different things, right? It's an expansive category. That's all.
Got it. Add them all together.
Yeah.
That's what it means.
Yep.
Yeah, and with like all this consolidation, what companies have you seen in the marketplace that have combined CMS and LMS platforms, ultimately to bring everything together?
Yeah, this past year has been a huge year for that. I think that's been really interesting. If you've been keeping up with the enablement trends in the enablement industry. For a while now, or a while ago, Showpad and LearnCore combined, and so I thought that was really one of those first times where we saw that combination. This past year, HighSpot also built their own LMS. We have Seismic that acquired Lessonly, Big Tin Can and Brainshark merged. So I think that's been a trend across the enablement space that I think is really exciting, because it means something for our organizations to have this type of consolidation. And I think what it means for us is that enablement should be attaching to those most important go-to-market metrics. And unfortunately, ROI or attribution have been on the roadmaps for our tech stack for a really long time. And by combining forces, you're able to tell more of that correlation story. You're able to say, someone took this learning, they took this certification, and they received this passing score, they applied it in the field, and now they're seeing results from it. And so that's been the missing part for a while, that enablement's had to like manually connect the dots behind the scenes. And it's been hard. It's been hard because we're always running after our next initiative to slow down and be able to share those results back. And when we do that, we make much more informed decisions and can actually provide stronger enablement. So I'm really excited for this trend, and I look forward to seeing it even consolidate even further.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see where it goes, because I think it's just the tip of the iceberg, right? It's been interesting to see these different mergers and acquisitions take place at a more rapid clip over the past year. I think the market's definitely moving in that direction, but there's still a lot of buyers out there who aren't necessarily thinking about enablement in this way. There's still a lot of education to do. I think you will see, as people become more educated, this sort of consolidation will pick up even further and will change even further as we sort of realize what's the optimal way of putting all these pieces together. Guys, I don't know. I don't actually think we've answered that question yet. I don't think anybody's doing it perfectly, but it's definitely top of mind, both for the software providers and for enablement professionals. So it's going to continue in one way, shape, or form.
Gosh, Jonathan, that's leading me to my next question, is around connecting these different pieces in enablement, right? Like, where do you kind of see that trend going, and how can a leader do that in an easier manner that makes it easier to manage? I know, Whitney, you were talking a lot about seeing that ROI, the correlation stories, and all of that. So, just for people who are on there, what's a way that you're seeing or that you're doing in your day to day that's making it easier to use and easier to measure across the org?
I'm happy to jump in and share tactically how we do that. So we leverage it's an old model called the Kirkpatrick Model. I want to say from like the 60s.
Yeah, I love it.
It's one of those that's tried and true in the learning space, and it's been really helpful in attaching sales metrics and my knowledge of like sales leadership into the learning space. And so just briefly running everyone through it, you can do this with a quick Google search as well, but level 1 is around reaction. So getting your surveys back, or the team's reaction to, are they motivated to apply what they've learned? Level 2 being, did they learn it? Did they retain the information? So some sort of knowledge check, whether that's a test or a quiz or a certification of sorts, to show that they actually retain the information in the way that we intended. We can tell if like everyone on the team misses question number 2, that's our fault, not their fault. And so we've got to go back and course correct, right? Level 3 is around behavior change, and that one's been a little bit harder to measure, but that's really where we're leveraging conversational intelligence to focus on how do we actually understand what's being said in the field and if they're applying what they've learned the way we want them to. And then last but not least is that ROI. So if they're doing all of those things, if these changes are taking place, are we seeing the results we intended? Are we seeing that positive trend, whether in our intended goals? So that could vary based on initiative, but most of the time it's going to relate to money. So are we seeing that increase in ARR, right?
Yeah, ROI is so key. We have so many conversations about it. We get so many questions about it. It's like we think enablement is valuable. It's important that our sales team is trained, but it's really hard to justify spend, on technology or on people to help us do this. So if I'm a sales leader and thinking about not just about how do I go about implementing an enablement strategy, but justifying an enablement strategy, absolutely, it's about correlating training outcomes to sales outcomes. It's about showing cost efficiencies. If I can show that I don't have to fly my entire sales team in from around the world 3 times a year, and instead I can accomplish some of this virtually, I can accomplish some of this asynchronously through recorded videos, through these different learning platforms. That's going to be cost savings. I don't have to put everybody up in a hotel. I don't have to take them all out to dinner and have a huge party. You can think about that as well. And then you just think about cost, think about efficiencies, like I was talking about before, showing that an enablement platform, enablement technology, and more impactful enablement processes are going to make my entire team more efficient. I don't have to take them out of the field as much in order to train them. They can stay in the field. They can keep selling. They can keep being productive. I don't need my sales enablement team to be the sole distributors of content and information, right? If you, like I was saying before, if you develop a culture where sellers are sharing information with each other, where people from the product team are sharing information with the sales team, that distributes the workload of enablement. That makes my entire team more effective. That makes my enablement team more effective without increasing their workload. Right? That's a huge efficiency that's gained when you start to reframe how you think about enablement. When you use technology like Allego, like some of these players, to accomplish your learning and training in a more impactful way. So, it's not. We talk about I do a ton of these webinars. We talk about enablement and all the technology you can use, and there's so many different places that you can start with this. It can feel really overwhelming. The thing that I always say is just pick a place to start, right? Think about if I don't have a culture of learning right now, how can I start to implement that, even without any technology? How can I start to sow the seeds of enablement in my organization? How can I get people bought into just the idea of it? How can I make sure that my managers are enabled to provide better coaching experiences? Just start there, right? You can build on top of that, and you don't have to do it all at once. Just pick one place to start where you can say, I want my enablement to make more of an impact in this one area. Do that, get buy-in, and then build on top of that. I think that's my best advice.
Awesome. Moving into our next topic. I know we got becoming a little crunched for time here, but just want to do a quick little plug. If you have any questions at the end, please add them to our Q&A. We should have time at the end to go deeper in there. But that brings us into our last topic: new technologies empowering modern learning, right? So obviously we're seeing a trend. Organizations are leveraging AI, CI to put the right content in the right hands at the right time in order to enable those positive outcomes, right? So I'll just stop there. How do you see this playing an impact like in the next year, right? How do you see this really driving, or more and more organizations adopting these in the next 1-2 years?
Yeah. I'll jump in, and Whitney, I'll pass it over to you because I'm really curious as to what you're thinking here. But if you go to the next slide, Mark, it just kind of level sets what we're talking about. So we're talking about conversation intelligence. Yep. So we're talking about recording sales calls and then providing AI-powered insights into those calls. And we're talking about things like AI, what we call AI virtual coaches at Allego, which is the ability to analyze a call and then not just see things like, how often did the seller speak versus the buyer speak, and how quickly did somebody speak, and what filler words did they use, things like that. But what are the next best steps that you should take as a seller based on the content of that call, right? What content should you send to the prospect based on the topics that were covered in the call? What learning content do you as a seller need access to based on your performance in the call? Are there certain courses that you should retake because you did something particularly poorly? Or are there moments in time that should be captured and shared with a team because they were delivered particularly well? This is the type of technology that we're talking about. I think it's really important, first and foremost, though, when we talk about things like artificial intelligence, that term always gets a response from people. And it can be either really positive, like, oh, AI, it's great, it's going to do my job for me, it's going to give me everything I need, or it can be really negative in terms of, oh, it's going to take my job away, or it's going to cause the apocalypse. I think the truth is somewhere in between. At Allego, and I think many folks in our profession, we think about artificial intelligence as amplifying human performance, right? So we're not taking humans out of the equation. We still need amazing sales managers who can provide feedback to their teams about what they're doing well and what they're doing poorly, right? That's not going to be replaced by AI. But what AI can do is give the manager the tools that they need to apply their coaching and apply their guidance at scale, like we were talking about before. I think when we talk about virtual sales teams, it can be really hard as a manager to stay in touch with every single rep if you don't have technology like conversation intelligence, where you're able to asynchronously or on demand watch their sales calls and provide feedback. We have some cool technology where it allows coaches to watch a call and then actually pinpoint the technology pinpoints moments during that call that they should look at, either because they were good, something went well, or because something went poorly, right? So it can just guide a coach through a sales call, so they don't necessarily need to watch the entire thing. It can just help them in their effort to make their sales teams better. So that's what I really like to focus on when talking about this topic of conversation intelligence and artificial intelligence and sales enablement. It can be really helpful. It can give people the tools that they need, the managers the tools that they need to coach at scale. It can give reps the feedback that they need without necessarily needing to wait for managerial feedback, and it can provide them with recommended next steps. That's all amazing, and we should think about how to use this technology. But it's not a replacement for human effort. We still have to. The technology is only going to be as good as what we put into it. But Whitney, what do you think on all this?
I mean, this is one of my favorite topics right now. I am so excited because I think back to like 4 years ago, and AI was just a buzzword, and we were like, what is that actually going to mean for our space? And now it's here, and conversational intelligence, like I can't imagine doing my job as well as I like the way that I could without it. Like I don't know how I did it before because this is so helpful in getting that insight and that visibility into what is actually being said on calls and real-time enablement. Layering that in, Jonathan, you were talking a lot about it earlier around getting information just in time. One of the reasons why I was so excited to join Outreach was because we have a part of our platform that is guiding all of our sellers in real time. And so it's voice recognition on the call that surfaces content cards. And I think about onboarding experiences and, you know, the phrase that's used, which is like, oh, it's drinking from a fire hose. Like no longer is that the case. The investment that we make in onboarding gets to live on because our sellers can actually see in real time the bite-sized information that we wanted them to remember. And so it helps with that reinforcement, that like the forgetting curve that we often deal with, where a lot of the investment that we make in enablement is lost really quickly afterwards. I'm so excited about this trend. And I would just encourage those on the call that if you haven't leveraged conversational intelligence, definitely set yourself up with a demo just to see what it is and to see it in action, because I think it is such a cool experience for the sellers, for the coaches, for enablement to get to that behavioral change side, which has been the biggest struggle for us in enablement for a long time. It's often that black hole where things fall apart. And that's where like we can't draw that correlation to ROI. This has been the missing piece in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I'll give the marketing perspective on this too. I love conversation intelligence because it allows my team to analyze sales calls, right? And again, see what's working, what's not working, what are buyers' pain points that we're not thinking about, that we should be creating content around, that we should be creating programs around. How can we help make sales content better based on this information? It's really, really, it's powerful. And that feeds into the whole sales content management area of sales enablement. How do we create better content for sellers? How do we make it more relevant to the sales conversations that they're having? So again, this all ties back into itself. It's not just conversation intelligence as a separate standalone product. Conversation intelligence powers everything within sales enablement. You can clip one of these recorded calls, right? Say you're a sales manager, you're watching a call, one of your reps does something incredibly well, right? That you want all of your reps to replicate. Clip that moment, clip that 15, 30 seconds, 1 minute, whatever it is. Clip it out, share it with your team. Use that as training content. Use that as enablement content and say, guys, this is what good looks like. This is what you should be replicating. You can use these as teachable moments, not just for the person who was conducting the call, but for the entire team. That's the type of thinking that this type of technology makes possible. And it's super exciting. You're right.
Yeah, I'm on board with you two with the excitement. I do not know where we would be leading a team of SDR, where we would be without conversational intelligence, especially in a virtual setting. I use it every day. It's something that we're using more and more as we move forward, right? Yeah, I'm sure a ton of people are thinking, right? How do you drive this digital adoption, right? There's some of us who are jumping in feet first into like, oh yeah, this is awesome. And then there's others who are a little bit slower to make the move, right? So how are you two driving that digital adoption?
Yeah, it's funny. Digital adoption to me means two different things, right? Like what they're related, but like digital adoption is a tool space as well right now. So we actually have technology that we can leverage that lays over all of our other pieces of technology. So that way reps can learn in the same exact way their workflows that they're looking to leverage. And so I think one of the things is to try and make it as simple as possible. And when you've got so many pieces of technology in your tech stack, having a singular mechanism for how to learn it helps break down some of those barriers, because again, within each one of those tools, they have their own unique experiences, their own unique user experiences, and it can feel incredibly disjointed. So anything that can tie those together is really important. The other advice is start small. So, Jonathan mentioned earlier with an enablement strategy, just like pick one thing and start with it. It's similar with driving adoption as well. You want to understand what are those foundational workflows that you want the team to master. Start with those, master those, and then layer in more once it feels second nature. But you've got to give people space to learn as well.
Yeah. I mean, Whitney, this is your wheelhouse. I don't think I could say it much better. But yeah, keep it simple. Make it easy. Sellers don't want to spend a lot of time bouncing from platform to platform. So if you can consolidate your technology or even just like reduce your tech stack a little bit while maintaining effectiveness, that's definitely something I would recommend. But make it as intuitive as possible. People don't want to waste time searching for content. They don't want to feel like they're being taken out of the field to do something extra, right? When they train and when they learn, they want to feel like it's helping them do their jobs better, and be more effective. So just take that mentality into all of this when you think about adoption. Just like, don't make it about how can the seller help you, although that would be nice if the seller could help you. But it's really about how do you help the seller, right? How do you make their life easier? How are you showing them that you are providing value that is useful to them and that will make an impact on their productivity? Because every seller is motivated to be productive, right? They are compensated on their productivity. They're often very competitive in nature, right? They want to do as well as they possibly can. So show them how what you're doing and how the technology that you're using is so easy and so powerful that it's gonna make them better at their jobs. If you can leverage that, if you can tap into that mentality with your sales team, it'll make your life a lot easier.
I love that. And just one tactical tip on how to do that too, which is you can leverage your sales champions in order to do that, right? Like if you've got a rep on your team that has seen a lot of success from doing things the right way, the way that you're intending for them to be done, recognition goes a long way, but also peers want to learn from peers who are successful. It means more to them when it's coming from the mouths of someone they admire that does the job day to day. And it helps them connect the dots because they're going to speak the same language in a way that someone who is observing the job from a corporate office can't really do. So I would say find your rep champions and share stories from the field when you have the successes. That's sort of that PR side, but you've got to win over hearts and minds to drive adoption. And so that's definitely a part of the strategy for sure.
Love it.
Yeah, and that leads me to my last question here, right? You kind of mentioned it, Whitney, kind of getting reps to speak out where they're seeing that success, right? And so I want to dive in a little bit about how are you two maximizing your team connectivity, right, and knowledge sharing. From my perspective, I learn the best when it comes from other people. When I'm like, oh, you saw this success, you had this success. You mentioned clipping a call. How are you doing this at scale? You might have some smaller organizations and large organizations.
Yeah. Whitney, do you want to kick that one off?
Sure. I think one of the first things that comes to mind is just to bring that, the story that I was sharing earlier to life is we are starting to send out micro learnings that leverage reps actually living the experience. What were the challenges that they were facing? Why didn't they believe that this was going to be the right way? And how did they overcome that belief hurdle? So we have leveraged reps from that perspective. I think connectivity right now, that's a real challenge, especially in this virtual world. So there's a lot that comes down to working with coaches and managers on making space for that type of engagement, whether that's an hour a week for enablement. And enablement doesn't have to mean one-to-many training. Enablement can mean facilitation of conversations with peers. And so we're starting to shift some of our strategic approach in with our account executives in that way, where we're actually just creating the space for them to have conversations where, you know, they can absorb the training, they can hear how others are absorbing the training and how they're thinking of applying it. And you often, like, it sinks in and you're able to absorb it quicker when you're watching someone else do that same activity. And so that's been a trick that we've been leveraging as well.
Yeah, that's great. I'd say, you know, leverage recorded video as much as you can, right? So people can absorb it on their own time. Asynchronous learning is huge for us and in the enablement area, I think in general, right? Not relying on live training sessions and live conversations, although again, those are very valuable. You should still do that. But, you know, let people record themselves. Let sellers record themselves sharing ideas or sharing what's worked well, sharing the challenges that they have, and share those recordings with the team to watch on their own times. Right? People are in different time zones. They have different personal commitments these days. I can meet the sellers where they are and let them learn on their own time. That's huge. And you guys have already said it, but peer-to-peer knowledge sharing is so powerful. Sellers trust other sellers. They like learning from each other. There's this idea of, you know, sellers being in the arena, right? In the arena with each other. They are on the ground. They are fighting these battles every single day. They're the ones who are taking a lot of the punches from the market. They're learning firsthand what works and what doesn't work. So they trust each other, right? They trust the people who are there with them doing the same job, having the same challenges as them. That's not to say that sales leaders and coaches and sales enablement professionals can't be incredibly valuable resources, right? But I think you know, if you can leverage your sellers and get them to share information with each other and see how valuable and how impactful that can be, that's going to help adoption across the board, and that's going to help effectiveness across the board.
Love it. A culture of transparency goes a long way.
Yep, exactly.
Right on. And then that is it for the slides. Now, with 4 minutes left, want to move into the Q&A section of this. So coming out from Brian, he mentioned during your segment when you were speaking, Jonathan, he asked you had research around the tool fatigue being referenced. He was asking around that, specifically what article that is, or if you have it on hand.
Yeah, that's going to be released, I'm hopeful, in like a week, maybe 2 weeks. So we'll anybody who's interested, you can make a note here and we'll definitely follow up. But yeah, it's brand new, hot off the presses. But it's been interesting for me to look at the results, because we always sort of suspected, it's kind of intuitive to say that fewer pieces of technology are better than many. But it's pretty cool to see it there in black and white, hearing it from the market, saying we have a lot of tools. We know that there's a lot that goes into enablement, but right now we don't have the right tools in place. People aren't using them properly, and we need to get more efficient with them. So it's just validation of that learning, and there's some cool stuff in there. So we'll definitely share it when it's ready.
Yes, absolutely. Any other questions specifically? Oh, there we go. Are these recommendations for both sales closers and customer success managers? I know you were typing that out, Whitney.
Yeah. I think, everything we've talked about today seems really scalable. You'll often see people attached to sales enablement, and it's why my team is called revenue enablement. There's other teams called like go-to-market enablement, and we're definitely, especially in the SaaS space in particular, there is so much value in aligning the sales and post-sales enablement strategy. So yes, I think everything we've talked about today is super scalable.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last question coming from Ben: what advice do you have for folks looking to make a transition from being an individual sales contributor to sales enablement?
Ooh, I love that one.
Yeah, I'll let you take that one.
That's awesome. I would say, one, if you have an enablement team there, definitely go and have some informational interviews. Learn about what enablement means at your organization, because it means something a little bit different everywhere still. So shadowing, understanding what they do, asking to raise your hand for a stretch project where you actually get to apply some of those skills with either facilitation or going through that part of the process. Being a champion for an enablement project will help you get some of the inside scoop as to how you can participate in that as well. So there's plenty of ways to get involved with enablement to really understand that world, to make sure that that's where you want to go. And if you have any other questions about it, the enablement community as a whole is incredibly giving with their time. And so we love to like mentor people and point people to the right resources. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and I can get you hooked up with a few of the different communities that I'm a part of that I think will be really helpful for someone looking to make that transition.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that is it for our webinar here. Appreciate everyone taking the time to talk or not talk with us, to watch us go around for the last hour. Feel free to reach out to any of us on LinkedIn if you have any questions. Hope everyone has a great rest of your day.